What's up, family? We are back on another episode of Cross Perspectives where faith meets real, relevant conversations. No fluff, no gimmicks, just real, raw conversation. Of course, it's your boy, Minister Jamin here, and I'm not alone.
Minister Naomi Johnson.
Minister Naomi Johnson in the house. Look, we got a special guest with us.
Yes.
We got the Rev Dr John Welch
Yay.
with us in the building.
Good to be with y'all.
Glad to have you. Glad to have you. He is well known in the city, currently the pastor of the 6 Mile Zion Baptist Church, president of the Baptist Ministers Conference. Vicinity. Did I say that right? All right.
That's a lovely last time.
Yeah,
so.
glad to have you.
Thanks
Glad
for
to
the
have you.
invitation.
So let's get right into it. So right now, the church is kind of in an interesting position where it's a lot more silent than the way it used to be. And if we're talking about as far as just like with the political stuff that's going on, kind of the social, economical stuff going on, speaking up often is misunderstood. It's often leads to divisiveness in the church. So today we kind of want to dive into that topic of kind of the tension. And so let's pose this question. How do we engage social and political movements theologically without losing the message we're called to carry and share?
Well, it's a good question. First of all, I have to start with Jesus. So, and I say that Jesus was probably the most political individual that walked the face of the earth. To separate him from being a political figure creates a distorted theology. And so we have to be attentive to the season. We have to be attentive to the concerns of the people, not just those who are sitting in the pews, but also those who are not. Because more than likely or not, what's affecting those in the pews is affecting those who are not in the pews. And so, it may require preaching what they'll call dangerous sermons.
Frankie Thomas.
That's right, Dr. Frank Thomas. You got to preach some dangerous sermons. You got to speak truth to power, but you can't just do it in the four walls of the church. You got to be out in the public sphere to do that, because that's where more people will see you, of course, and be able to hear the message, but also see that you're supporting whatever movement exists. So I agree with you. I think, while we might say the church has been silent, they've also kind of been invisible. So the Black Lives Matter movement did not really have the church.
No, they didn't. Think about it.
And in fact, hip hop, which preceded Black Lives Matter and still lives on and is the greatest movement since the civil rights, does not have the church. In fact, the church kind of condemned hip hop.
Yes.
Which I think was the first mistake. And had they not condemned the hip hop, the church might even be more relevant in some of the subsequent movements that have taken place.
That's actually good. That's actually good. So do you think that there is kind of this I guess sense of fear from church leadership to preach and talk about those dangerous messages from a standpoint of kind of them being vulnerable or them being out there as far as choosing a side and dealing with a congregation that might be divided and kind of like navigating the lines of not saving face but kind of balancing shepherding what could be a divided flock.
We talk a black church or church period?
I mean, we can talk black church. We talk about black church. We'll keep it black
So
church.
clearly there is, so, I spent over 20 years in a Presbyterian church at Peace USA. And and so now back in the Baptist church. So I've seen the division in white church
Yes.
that has the sprinklings of some Jimmies, you know. And so I'm going to start there and then work my way back to the black church, okay?
Yeah.
So, one, talking about race or anything regarding sometimes justice, but definitely race in a white context can be offensive. And in fact, I wasn't talking about race, but I was preaching at a Catholic church one time on a Sunday that kicked off the week of Christian unity. And I was talking about at this time, this is when voter IDs requirements was starting to get into the narrative.
Okay.
And so I was challenging that. And I actually got heckled in my sermon. This white gentleman, you know, who I later found out who he was, yelled out, "This is a house of God." In other words, like, don't bring politics in here, okay? It's like, this is a house of God. And then as I kind of glanced up, I saw him and a young lady walking out the church. And so after I finished preaching, it was before the communion, the priest said, you know, if anybody knows who that couple, who they are, let me know. And he says, you know, sometimes we have to hear messages that will challenge us. So appreciate, you know, Pastor, I don't know if I was a doctor at the time or not, but anyway, appreciate Reverend Welch for bringing that message. Excuse me. And so as service had ended and as we had processed out, I'm greeting people as they're coming out of the sanctuary. And as probably the last 4 or 5 were coming out, I looked out the corner of my eye and saw a couple coming in, which I thought was odd. It's like, why would these people be coming in and everybody else is going out?
Yeah.
Here it was a couple that heckled me, or the guy and his what I found to be his newly wedded wife. And so he says to the priest, "Did you bring him here? Was it you invited him here?" And then so he's like, "Look, I coach football in Penn Hills. You know, I coach black kids, I coach white kids, this, that, and the other." And then the woman says, and look, Fox News says that there is voter fraud all over the place. And I said, "I'm out." I told the priest, "You got this. I'm not engaging and I ain't engaging in that." And so that was one incident. And I've had a couple of others in white context where people didn't agree and said, you know, "I hear you, but I don't agree." Okay, fine. And so, but let me sort of jump ahead to 2016 when President Trump was first elected. So the morning after the election, I'm at the seminary. I was working there at the time. And so we had some students who were kind of like really upset because here you had this misogynist, this sexual predator, liar, et cetera, that was elected president. In spite of the, what was it, the Action Hollywood or whatever that show where he was caught having a conversation saying he grabs women by the, you know what?
Yeah, I can't think of what it is. But I know what you're talking about.
So anyway, so people were kind of concerned, but there was another faction of students who were celebrating. And so we decided we were going to bring the community together, not just the seminary students, but seminary students, faculty, staff, and the wider community. So we were in the chapel. We probably had over 200 people in that room. And so we had Dr. Drew Smith on the panel. We had Dr. Leanne Fuller on the panel. We had, who was the Episcopal priest at the time, Dorsey McConnell. And there was a fourth person who I can't recall. But what I do remember and what I want to get to is this. During the Q&A session, there was a white gentleman who stood up. And he says, "I pastor a church out there." And when he said out there, I knew what he meant. Yeah. He says, and my wife is concerned about my well-being. He says, because they said to me, "Don't forget who you pastor because we know how to make you disappear." So we're talking about active threats, okay? And so for some pastors, it's like, this is my livelihood. If they put me out, I don't know what I'm going to do. My response to that is, you got to remember who called you.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and forget the place where you're at, because if God calls you there, you know, God can also call you somewhere else. So, so that's the white context. In the black context, the biggest division, a couple of things. So when I ran for mayor in 2017, there were some folks who said, preachers shouldn't be politicians.
Really?
I was like, okay, all right.
Can't do nothing.
So I just kept it moving. I didn't win the election, but I came in second.
Yeah.
And God bless Darlene Harris. She's not gone on to be with the Lord. But she was a city councilwoman. She came in third, and Bill Peduto beat us both and came in first. But so there are some who don't think politics and faith belong together. Preachers shouldn't be politicians. You don't bring politics into the pulpit, right? One other example is back in 2015, I think, or 2005, I believe it was. I was part of a group, an organization that brought thousands of people to Washington, D.C., to the Capitol. And we had a protest on the lawn of the Capitol because it was around immigration. And
Hot topic.
we had, why we were there was because the House had already passed a bill. We called it the Sensenbrenner bill because Congressman Sensenbrenner was the one who authored it. And so, but the problem with the bill was it would felonize anybody who helped an immigrant. So we're talking about what happened in Atlanta, folks giving a drink of water in an election line, right?
Yeah.
Same kind of thing. If you were caught assisting an immigrant, what they called illegal immigrants, you would be charged with a felony. Well, the Catholic Church was in an uproar, of course, and everybody should have been because, the Bible says, love thy neighbor as you love yourself. So we protested against that because the Senate Senate Committee was discussing it. And we didn't want it to come out of committee. So that's why we were in D.C. I say all of that to say this. There were black folks then, and there's still black folks now who don't understand the connection between our immigration policies and us who are Native Americans, so to speak, who are black folks, African Americans. And so, they jump on this term illegal. They came here illegally. Not understanding they're undocumented for sure. Now, there are a lot of folks who are undocumented that came legally, but because of our immigration system, time expired and they don't have time to get their documentation updated.
Okay.
Nobody's talking about the Eastern Europeans that are here undocumented or the folks from Canada that are here undocumented. It's only the folks who are brown.
Yes.
Black and brown. So getting black folks to understand that issue also affects us because what they were hearing was, they're here to steal your jobs.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the bottom line was you wasn't going to try to get that job in the first place.
Right.
So there's been that kind of division in the church for a long time, black church, white church, whether it's on race, whether it's on immigration. But it all boils down to economics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wonder where the disconnect started with African Americans not understanding the politics because the church was the center of the community and that, that was the steeple. So at what point when there was the separation from church and politics, when did that start happening?
Well, that's a good question. So understand that, the Progressive National Baptist Convention was created because the National Convention didn't want to deal with King and the movement.
Okay.
So, so we don't want to say that all black churches are about social justice because there were still some then, and I'm sure there's still some now.
Yeah.
That really aren't. So it's kind of hard to say when the fissure actually took place. But so here's my hypothesis.
Okay.
All right. I think we got comfortable after the fruit of the civil rights movement.
Okay.
All right. Because you had affirmative action in place. I'm an affirmative action kid. I know I got into Carnegie Mellon because of affirmative action. My grades were decent coming out of Central Catholic, but I'm sure it was affirmative action.
Right.
I got hired at IBM on an affirmative action basis because my grades coming out of Carnegie Mellon suck. I can't say that.
Yes, you can.
They were pitiful.
Yeah.
All right. But I got into PTS with bad college grades, but ended up, having an A+ average. So, you can mature as you get older, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know, lost my train of thought. You were asking sort of where the split took place.
Yeah,
Okay,
where
yeah.
the
So I
split,
think
yeah.
we got comfortable. So as we got into these white collar jobs, as we were kind of moving out
makes
into the
sense.
suburbs, which we should have never left the city in the first place.
Yeah.
As we're moving out to the suburbs and had these white picket fences, we kind of started resting on our leans, and social justice kind of became an afterthought, if a thought at all. And so I think that contributed to it. And the other problem with that is that there are generations, grandchildren of the comfort generation,
Okay.
the generation. What am I? I'm a boomer.
Boomer.
The boomer generation got comfortable. We pampered the generation behind us, who are now pretty much in the grandparent age, definitely parents themselves. And so, they weren't primed for protest. They weren't primed, for organizing, Now, certainly, there are younger folks who are organizing. Very few are organizing, but a lot of them are mobilizing. So there's a difference between mobilizing and organizing. A flash mob is mobilizing.
Okay.
But if you're not moving the needle on anything, you're not organizing.
Right.
Okay. So we got to make sure there's that distinction. But I
Yeah.
think I think where the fissure kind of started was the tail end of from baby boomers generation that got comfortable, and was going to church, listening to wonderful messages, but nothing criticizing the system, because there wasn't anything to criticize, so to speak, because we were moving on up vis-a-vis the Jeffersons, right?
Okay.
Yeah, so that's good. So then I guess the question then becomes, how do we kind of shift to getting comfortable being uncomfortable? Like,
Again,
how
yeah.
can the church start to approach, getting back to kind of, talking about and actually putting, the boots on the ground when it comes to, social justice and equity and just conversations around socialism. Like, how can we kind of get back to that, or get back to that space where, like Naomi said, the church can get back to being the focal point of the community, being the place where you can be educated, not just spiritually, but, knowledgeably with, what's going on in the world and, society, and, taking a stand on certain issues.
Well, first, I think you have to recognize the need, acknowledge the need, and respond to the need. So whether it's housing, whether it's food, whether it's incarceration, or providing means for those who are reentering into society to, so you have to find where the needs are, and you have to be part of the intersection.
Okay.
So be there at the nexus, and actually forming ministries around that. It's going to be, you talking about how do you become uncomfortable again? That is going to make us uncomfortable, particularly if you're working with formerly incarcerated. There are still neighborhoods. Back in the 90s, there was this acronym called "Not in My Backyard," whatever that stood for.
What?
Okay, they did not want to have rehabilitation homes. They didn't want to have any kind of reentry facilities in their neighborhoods, and so these community groups were actually protesting against it. Right, so. And it wasn't just in Pittsburgh. I mean, all across. It's like folks don't want them people in our community. And so, and they're not just all white folks saying we don't want them in our community.
Right.
There's black folks too, right? So the church is going to have to find ways to crowd out the noise and insert itself into those intersections where the need is. And so you may have to create not just a 501c3, but a community development corporation. You want to have. We know that there is a need for housing. There's a need for housing for the transitional housing for men. Men with children. There's some facilities for women with children, but there are hardly any for men, single men with children. So, you may have to do housing. You may have to have gardens, provide food. You'll have to find some way to intersect with health facilities, because we are still the most chronically ill population
Yes.
there is.
Yeah.
And so how do we mitigate that? So we've got to find out where the needs are, acknowledge the needs, and respond to the needs and form ministries around that need.
If you do get a 501c3, are there stipulations about speaking out against the government and some of the things that they're doing? Are you allowed?
Well, so, there's some good things that President Trump did, as well as some of the other stuff. So while an executive order is not law, he did create an executive order, and it was basically to placate his conservative base. And that is to allow for churches to actually be involved in politics without repercussions from the IRS. So the safe thing is to, I'll say for us, is to be politically aware, socially conscious, and vocal on social issues. Because truth be told, the Democrats ain't really helping us much, and Republicans ain't helping us much. So the best thing to do is be politically neutral in your narratives and what you're saying, and confront the issues, because there's blame on both sides.
Yes.
And organize against everybody who's an incumbent, because we put you in, we can take you out.
Yeah. So the whole Christian nationalist thing, I don't think a lot of people understand what that movement or group is about and does. Do you know anything about the Christian nationalism? And I know that they are having strong ties and making moves silently in politics, but like to the everyday person, like what exactly is that type of group or movement about?
Yeah, so let me just say, not everything Christian is of Christ. Okay, and that's one. And let's just say white Christian nationalism. Let's call it what it is.
Okay.
It's white Christian nationalism.
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, there are some token blacks that are part of it. And so, but it is about, one, nationalism is looking at the origins of this country. What was the tenets, what was the premise or the desires of the founding fathers of this country, right? And the whole idea of the founding fathers was women had no voice. Okay. Blacks had no place except for in the plantation. Native Americans need to be excommunicated from the land so that we can take it. All right. So it's about whiteness.
Okay.
All right. Christian nationalism, aka white Christian nationalism, is about the power of whiteness.
Okay.
And it shows up in extreme ways. So it's the new Ku Klux Klan. It is the current and past Aryan Nation, but it has a Christian veneer, all right, and trying to use faith as and co-opting Jesus as a means of propagating their message. So it is dangerous. As I said, not everything Christian is of Christ, and they're an example. So part of that is also whitewashing history,
Okay.
banning books,
Okay. That's separate.
getting politicians to ban books. The other part is, and unfortunately, so the abortion or the pro-life, pro-life only. So, all right, pro-life is preserving whiteness.
Okay.
All right. Because why? Because statistics says, I think it's either 2050, 2040, one of those years, whites will no longer be the majority. That's what they're afraid of. So you have to look at the confluence of all of these actions. Let's look at the deportation actions. Deporting people who are brown, not those who are here undocumented that are white.
Right.
Bringing in South Africans with privilege. Okay. Stopping abortions means stop killing white babies. All right. So it's really a movement to preserve whiteness in this country. And for abortions, it's like, okay, well, God says, "Thou shalt not kill." All right, we know what the commandment says, obviously, but they're trying to create a Christian platform for their agenda. And one of the big proponents of that, which Roe v. Wade too, right? So one of the big adversaries of that was the LaHaye folks, so those who wrote the Left Behind series.
Okay.
All of that money, a lot of that money went into supporting the anti-Roe v. Wade legislation and Hobby Lobby. So there's some places I won't shop. Chick-fil-A, I will not buy a burger or chicken sandwich from Chick-fil-A because I know they support that agenda, right?
That's important
So
to know.
you got to be careful where you're putting your money and what you're supporting. Yeah, it might taste good, but everything,
Right.
everything that tastes good ain't good for you. All right, so Christian nationalism, white Christian nationalism, is not Christianity at all because of how they treat the neighbors. They're privileged, and the other thing you need to be careful of is. No, I won't say that. I won't. I'll tell y'all offline, but I ain't gonna say it right now.
Okay.
All right.
That's good. So one of the big takeaways then is just being properly informed, and one of the cool things is definitely with emerging leaders, you're actually leading one of the D-men cohorts, specifically around theological engagement. And I'm curious how a course like that and what leaders can gain from that can kind of get people to shift from just having opinions and kind of being misinformed to actually actively making the connection between being informed and then having useful and productive engagement in the communities. So if you want to share a little bit about, kind of that course that you're, running and just kind of how that kind of can also incorporate, some nuggets for, other leaders that might not, be in that program that could also, gain some insight on kind of navigating that balance.
Yeah, thanks. So this was my second year teaching the course. Last year, 2 years ago, when I taught it, we looked at the history of social movements.
Oh, that's good.
And because not all social movements were black social movements. They were white social movements that affected blacks, but they wouldn't let blacks really participate. So that precedes the civil rights movement. So looking at the history of social movements and the role that the church played.
Okay.
And then I kind of adapted that this year to looking at movements we didn't address. So last year, I think we looked at I'm blanking on it was a women's movement.
Me too?
Way before then.
Oh, way before then?
Yeah. Suffrage. Okay,
Okay.
the suffrage.
Oh, yeah, the
okay,
suffrage
women's suffrage. So there were some black women who were part of that really, they weren't really given voice. Okay, but this was a white movement. And because, the United States was built on patriarchy. Okay. And so you had the women's suffrage movement. And so what was the role of church? And now the church was really complicit in a lot of these, not in support of, but in the oppression.
Yes.
Much like it was for slavery. So if you read Jamar Tisby's book, The Color of Compromise, you will see how the church was involved in the slave trade and in proliferating slavery in the South.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, it's yes. Which kind of was the footers, or I guess the seeds of the weeds for white Christian nationalism today. So So the course was looking at social movements and the role of the church. What I did this year was I integrated technology with it. And I integrated. Last year I had Black Lives Matter as the final last movement, but this year I integrated hip hop as hip hop preceded BLM, and the culture of hip hop. So I had the students examine, okay, where was the church involved or where weren't they involved? So where were they involved? How were they involved? And where were they absent? And trying to identify what were some successes and failures. If we can identify the successes and the failures, then we can replicate the successes and not replicate the failures and moving forward. Good. But also understand that we are in the age of technology. So how do we let technology be our friend as well?
Was the church a part of Black Lives Matter?
Not really.
Okay. I know a lot of people are on the fence about that movement, so I was just wondering where the position of the church was.
Yeah, it wasn't. And unfortunately, the Black Lives Matter was demonized by the Jewish community too. So, there's okay, I'm just going to put it out there. So there's this tension between the Black community and the Jewish community. The Jewish community is trying to find, some are trying to find a way to bridge that.
Yes.
Okay. Because there were some good Black Jewish dialogues and collaborations. The truth of the matter is we have a similar history of oppression and annihilation. And so, but there are some who are reveling in what the state of Israel is doing to Palestine. And I personally cannot condone what's happened to Palestinians, in particular Palestinian Christians, but Christians or Muslims alike.
Yeah.
I cannot condone what's happening there because it's very reminiscent of what white folks did to us here.
Yes.
And it's reminiscent of what the Dutch and otherwise did in South Africa. So, there is, we need to understand that, I'm trying to think how to even get on that subject. Good Lord.
We always ask that question. How do we end up here?
Yeah. So it's important to understand that there are some folks that you have to keep close and some that you have to keep closer. And I just lost my thought. I'm at that age that if you don't repeat your question 20 times, I'm gonna take you somewhere else. So
that's okay.
What was that original question you asked me?
Now, Lord.
We talked about my course, but then we went somewhere else.
The Black Lives Matter.
Were they part of the church? Yeah, and I said that the Jewish community was criticizing. I remember I tried to bring Jeremiah Wright here, and it was during the time Barack Obama was running for president.
Okay.
In fact, I didn't try. I had him committed to coming here because I was organizing a program around end of life and the church's role in the messaging and supporting, making sure that we prepare ourselves for end of life situations. And we were in partnership with a Jewish organization, but once the news got out about Jeremiah Wright, Dr. Jeremiah Wright, and the fact that Obama was a member of Trinity United Church of Christ, and that soundbite that kept going around where he kept saying, where Dr. Wright was saying, God damn America, and then they found out that, he was friends or he had worked with Louis Farrakhan. I was like, oh no, we can't bring him here. And so there's a hypersensitivity of the Jewish community, and understandably so, because anti-Semitism is real.
Yes, it is.
But so is racism.
Yes, it is.
And so until we're willing to recognize the fault lines and understand too that you can get away with some things that I can't get away with because of the color of my skin. But there's some things that you can capitalize on because of your faith. So you can be Jewish one minute and white another.
Yeah.
And I ain't got that privilege.
Yeah.
I'm black through and through. So.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good. So, and I think, again, it kind of goes, hand in hand with kind of the balance of like, not just the danger of being silenced, but also, it adds to the danger of being misinformed. and having misinformed engagement. And I think what you see now is, just from, even our generation, you have a lot of people that separate becoming and forming disciples and developing voices, right? So you got a lot of people that are looking to go viral, or that are looking to kind of start the next movement and start these trends, but a lot of times they're not really truly informed, for one. And, even, from a church standpoint, you know, you got some that are just so quick to be the first person, or the first leader, the first pastor to get up and say something, and half the time they're speaking out of misinformed information. And it kind of leads to kind of that danger of, is it even now, with the need for churches to get back to being a place where you know they're the focal point of the community, but it presents now that danger of silence versus being misinformed. Where in some cases, some churches, it might be better for them to be silent than to try to follow the trend and try to be someone that speaks on these things, but then they're misinformed, because now what you're sharing, if it's not accurate, you're now causing damage and causing a ripple effect that might not be beneficial at the end of the day.
Well, I think that's is particularly dangerous now, giving social media platforms. So,
Yeah.
I still remember when we only had like 4 channels on the TV, and it was black and white. Y'all don't know nothing about that.
I do, because you had to turn the knob with the foil on the antenna.
With the antenna, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so, but yeah, we have 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason, right? So right before coming here, I was on a radio show for a pastor in Philadelphia, as an internet radio show, and we were talking about this recent situation with Pastor Jamal Bryant and Target, right? Is it on or is it off, right?
Yeah.
And so, we were like, okay, so if we had an opportunity to do it again, what should we do differently? And I said, well, first of all, you can't be a lone ranger.
Yeah.
He has a wonderful platform, Pastor Bryant, but so does the pastor at Alpha Street. So does the pastor at Trinity United Church of Christ. He should not have been the only voice out there. He should have been collaborating with folks who have large platforms, and they should have had a cogent and cohesive strategy, right, that did not completely differentiate itself for what the women started in Minnesota. So there is that tendency to try to jump out there. Somebody asked a question in the chat on this radio program, do we think Jamal Bryant was trying to get out there to bring attention to himself? And we kind of all agreed. Well, I didn't say anything. The other 2 pastors kind of said, no, I don't think he did that to try to bring attention to himself. And in my mind, I'm like, well, he already did enough to bring attention to himself, so he didn't need that, But, so, there are some times when we have to be prudent before we say anything, make sure we get the facts. But there's really no need to rush out there to try to be the next unappointed leader of the community.
Yeah.
Because I think about,
Go ahead.
I was going to say, I think about Jesse Jackson, and now that he's passed, like, where's the torch going? Who's it going to? I thought about that during his funeral, like, what's the next generation? Who's going to be that person? And maybe that's not the answer. Maybe it shouldn't be one person. Maybe it should be multiple people starting the movement.
Yeah. I mean, King gets a lot of attention, but there were a lot of other men and women that were just as involved, part of the trainings and organizing. And so, he took the bullet for many because he was the one he was the face, and he was the one that white folks saw as the threat. And so, I don't want to celebrate and I don't want this to come across as if I'm celebrating terrorism. Although I will, I'm talking about national terrorists. Forget about international terrorism. We got some terrorists right here in this country, and they don't look like me. But anyway, I got to stop them tangents because. Oh crap! There I go again. Repeat the question.
Do you think that it should be multiple people leading
yeah.
the charge?
So these terrorists over in the Middle East
Yeah.
got cells. You know, they got like you think you take out the leader and you really stop the movement because you
The
know
next day, next one was sworn in.
yeah, you know, it's like, you know, they're like cockroaches. I mean, you know, there's there's a whole army elsewhere, you know. So and so I agree with you. I think having a single leader is not in our best interest. You know, not having any known leader might even be in our best interest. I think working subterraneously, organizing underground.
Yeah.
Because truth be told, once the civil rights agendas got passed, the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, the folks that didn't like it was working underground for many years. And so President Trump is a response to Barack Obama, but that was in the works long before Barack was elected.
Yeah.
Okay. And so for him to get a second term is just proof in the pudding that there is some underground work that's going to make sure that they make America great again the way they define great.
Great.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, you know, we always get back on this topic somehow, but it comes back to, you know, again, when it's not just one person and you're looking at leading as a collective and leading together and the sense of community, we just gonna say it. There's too many egos, and there's too many people that kind of have they want it to be all about them, and you know you see it, you know, with individuals, you see it in church leadership. You know, there was a time, you know, like you mentioned, you could have various issues, and you got all the churches coming together, and they're doing these, you know, community programs, or you know, the community efforts, or they're partnering together, and it's like now you don't see much of that happening. You see a lot of, oh, let me do this. This got to have our name on it if we do it, or you know, this is a good idea. I'm gonna take that idea and I'm gonna run with it first. And this, you could have so much success in, you know, being that community, being a group of, you know, churches, a group of church leaders, accomplishing, you know, and actually making a difference. But it's, you know, it's tough when you see, you know, the lack of churches working together.
That's my struggle with the Baptist Ministers Conference, just to be straight up.
Okay.
Too much, not enough collaborating, not enough. So not just the Baptist Ministers Conference, Allegheny Union Baptist Association too. You know, they are weak because the churches, so for example, I know of 1, 2, 3 churches currently that are struggling to get a boiler put in. You know, 2 of them are for over $30,000. One is about $50,000. They don't have the money. Okay. And they're trying to raise it on their own. Now, if you think about how much money we collect each week in our churches and where we deposit the money, all right, some small congregations, some larger congregations, but it don't matter. If I had 50 churches that are willing to take $20,000 out of their bank and say, you know what, we're going to deposit right here and next here. That's $1 million that we're putting in the bank and say, okay, for this $1 million, we need you to do A, B, C, D, and E for us.
Yeah.
You need to loan this church money so they can get a $38,000 boiler, you know? And so, like I said before, it all boils down to economics. We have the power, you know, this so-called fast/boycott of Target could work if we organized it better.
Yeah.
And realize that our money is green just like everybody else's.
Yes.
And if we collectively decided we are not going here, the kind of impact it would make. The same time, same thing would happen if we took our monies out of PNC or out of Citizens or out of Key Bank and put it in Chase or somewhere else, and then negotiated that, look, this is what we need you to do, because this is only a piece of the money we got.
Yeah.
This ain't all the money we got.
Right.
And for you to get the rest, you got to meet these demands. Right. And so that has been our challenge and problem for a long time, and what has contributed to our weakness as a church, as a Black church. And so until we get that part right, pastors not competing. When you got 4 or 5 churches in the same neighborhood and they all got like 20 people in it, why do you need 4 or 5 churches with 20 people in it instead of just having one with 100?
The Catholics will shut a church down in a minute and transfer them
Exactly.
over to the next.
Exactly.
They don't care.
Exactly. And I said, in fact, I was preaching out at the Kiski area, the AUBA's Kiski area session, and I said, look, you got 5 churches, and you decide you're going to collaborate. You might wonder, what are we going to do with the churches? Well, sell the 4 and put the money in that one pot. Or if you can't sell them, turn one into a youth center, turn one into a business incubator, turn one into a youth development. Turn those places into something, right?
Yeah.
So you just got to be thinking differently, but think collaboratively.
Yeah.
If we want to make a difference in our communities and be relevant again as a church.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the community would take churches more seriously and actually be drawn to the church if they see that they're doing something for the community collectively. That's good.
Other than holding funerals.
Yeah. There you go.
Because this next generation, they're not interested in coming to church.
They're not.
And trying to figure out, let's make the best AI flyers so that we can, have them come to an event. That's not keeping them.
It's not keeping them. And I think we do a poor job of really understanding the power of money and investing. So vis-a-vis, this generation you're talking about, this younger generation, they don't have life insurance. So they're going to do a GoFundMe every time there's a funeral.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And we are underinsured. So, I'm trying to get younger folks to realize, look, at your age, it ain't going to cost you anything to take out $1 million policy. Take out $1 million policy, $2 million policy, because the whole idea is more than likely you're going to die unless Jesus comes before it happens. And you set that money up into a trust or something for your kids, your grandkids. You're creating generational wealth that way, And so everybody needs life insurance. Everybody's going to die. Let the money work for you. Set it up in a way so that, if there's going to be inheritance tax, it's not going to kill them. So we just got to think differently. Also, since we are going to leave this earth, why not take a policy, and have the church be a beneficiary? So, you may not have a whole lot of money of your own to leave for the church. The insurance company does, so we got to, if we want to sustain ministries, you can create a 501c3 if you're going to make it relevant, and the folks still aren't understanding the whole bring the tithes and offerings into the storehouse. You got to find a way to create alternative revenue streams that's going to fund your ministries, even after some folks are gone. And so we just have to think at money differently and the power of money, whether we're harnessing it together or we're finding different sources to get it.
Yeah, because there's grants that could be used instead of always asking for the church for money. There's grants out there to help with improvements and different programming and things. So just being informed and creative about, how we want to go about this is definitely important.
But look who's behind the grants. You got to look at the source of the grants too.
That's
all right.
true.
So one of the things, you'd be surprised how many slave owners lived in Pittsburgh. You look at Negley Avenue. He was a slave owner. It's Negley. Some of these streets are named after slave owners. Okay, and a lot of them were were Presbyterian churches, and a lot of them were trustees at the University of Pittsburgh. And so, but where did that money go? A lot of the families, like the Mellons, et cetera, that money is tied up in the foundations.
Yeah.
With certain restrictions on how they're going to give them up. So there's this concept called colonialized philanthropy.
Okay.
All right. You and I may not get money consistently or the same amount as some of these white organizations.
Yeah.
Okay. And so the best thing for us is to be able to generate our own revenue. So if you're going to create a community development corporation, and here's the other thing, property. We need to be acquiring as much property as possible.
Yeah.
You ain't got to have nothing on it yet. But if you own land, Willie James Jennings said, if you own land, you control life. Reverend Dr. Willie James Jennings. If you own land, you control life. Who has the largest proportion of renters? We do. Mm-hmm. The lowest percentage of home ownership, which means our lives are tied up into the landlord.
Yeah.
Which means if I own a building and I see, I could probably make more money now that I see development coming this way, I'm getting off Section 8 rolls.
Yeah.
I'm evicting you. I'm going to redo my building, and I'll be able to charge 4 times the amount of rent. So we're easily evicted because we don't control our own life, because we don't own the places where we live in.
Yeah.
Same thing with funding. So we got to create opportunities where we generate our own revenue. Yeah, we may not be getting money from the people in the pews, but folks spend. Even if you got to own a building and put a beauty shop and barber shop in it and charge rent, that's revenue. If you own land and you collaborate with a developer, you can sign a 30 and 40-year land lease so that you're getting revenue every year from that developer on whatever they build on that.
Okay.
So I short-term grants, long-term generate your own revenue.
That's good. What's the church in Homewood? They started acquiring land.
The Bible
Center.
Yeah, they started acquiring the cafe and
the cafe. They got the
yeah.
They partnered with
Own our own.
Own
Right there
our
on the corner.
own. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, Reverend John Wallace. Reverend Dr. John Wallace. Yep.
That's a page out of a book that people need to learn, because that was good.
For sure. And why can't we form a speaking of the AUBA and Baptist Minister Conference, but this don't even take that. You take you create a consortium of churches that'll form an LLC and buy up property, and you determine who comes in and who doesn't, who uses that land for what and who doesn't, right? So again, there's ways in which we don't have to be the victim.
Yeah.
We can determine our own destiny and the outcome of our own communities.
Has that ever been thought of for Pittsburgh, like as far as for because there's a lot of land that was acquired just on the East End before, all the gentrification. There was a lot of land.
a lot of vacant land.
There's a lot of vacant land in Homewood, a lot of vacant land in Larmer. Larmer has the most vacant parcels of any of the communities, and Flat.
Okay.
Homewood is next. And so, you're seeing the wave is coming this way anyway.
Oh, yeah.
Bakery Square was just like, we're coming. Because in order to build Bakery Square, they had to extend the Larmer boundary out to Penn Avenue. Because before it stopped, I think, at Hamilton.
Okay.
So they moved the boundary so that they could get federal incentives, federal dollars, in order to build that.
Oh.
Because of the social demographics, the social economic demographics of Larmer. That's what enabled them to help get that money in order to build it. So politics is you got to be aware of the games they play. And I remember I was part of a protest against the developers of Bakery Square because they were able to skirt some of the laws by putting a hotel up on the second floor rather than the first floor. That's where, so you got the Panera on the first floor and the hotel on the second. So there's some conniving people out here, but just got to understand what's going on, and that's why we as pastors need to be socially and politically aware and informed, so that our folks, without a vision, people perish. And it ain't just forecasting; it's also without education, is an understanding and knowledge of what's happening, people perish.
For the Baptist Ministers Conference, is that something that you try to inform them or try to implement any type of these strategies? Or
Look, I saw you had Pastor LaFon Flood Francis on here.
yes,
And so he's our worship leader, but he's also part of our Social and Political Action Committee.
okay,
And so we had him draft a letter to elected officials and organizations about our concerns regarding what's happening in our communities.
yeah.
And the whole idea is a Google Doc to get clergy to sign.
Has that been received?
Well,
I got 18 signatures,
How many do you need?
as many as we can get, because numbers speak.
Yeah.
Right? So, one of the pastors actually said, well, do we all have to sign it, or can't we just sign it as the president? And LaFon astutely said, there's power behind numbers.
Well, why would you not sign it? That's what I just don't. I mean, if you're looking for signatures, at the very least, it just commits you or, solidifies that, you're on board with this, this vision and this desire. And I would assume as a pastor that you will have that same kind of desire to see change, not just, and then again, it comes back to not just what you're doing in your four walls, but it's about the community. It's interesting.
That's the reason we're having this conversation.
Interesting.
Well, nobody lives in the community anymore. They drive to church and then drive out of church.
Mm-hmm.
So that the investment isn't really there because they don't live there anymore like they used to.
Because the investment now is how we can be international and global and reach all these people outside of, the state and outside the country. And we're more focused on them and catering, them than on people in our own communities. I heard, I'm not sure what pastor it was, and they mentioned the same thing. They said, we have churches that are all on board with going out and building and planting churches over in Africa and, in all these places, but they're completely absent in dealing with some of the issues right there in their own communities.
That's fact. And the pandemic did a lot of damage. Besides taking lives, it also made folks think they're international when they ain't, because they're showing their services on Facebook, right? It's crazy, but you're right. And this was a sin of white churches too. They were real comfortable sending their money overseas than actually being there. But the problem with them being there, so when I was dean at the seminary, we have the World Mission Initiative. And the mentality of the World Mission Initiative earlier was, okay, we're going to we're going to take these students over to these countries, as Christians. We're going to, we want to kind of Christianize them, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right? Like that was the old model of World Mission was we're going to save the savages. And that mentality kind of continued over the years and until we got a new director at WMI, and he's not there now. Bala is now the new director. I just found out. But I hired Bala, and I hired his predecessor. But he brought in the mentality that, he brought in the understanding that of colonialism that all white folks were doing was colonizing, in the name of saving, right?
Yeah.
And so we shifted the mentality and the mindset and ideology of the World Mission Initiative is like, God is already over these places.
Right.
Let's go and see what God is doing and what can we learn from them, right? And so this whole idea of sending money and, no, don't get me wrong, it's not, these third world countries are in need, and understanding first, second, and third world dynamics is important. Understanding that the International Monetary Fund has the ability to loan some of these third world countries money to help them build infrastructure. But not only them, these first world countries like the United States also has the ability to help. So there isn't there isn't a desire to really assist these poor countries, and so it's not like they really need us to go in and do anything. They have the understanding and the knowledge to do things. They just need to be reinforced and supported, and for somebody to walk alongside them. So looking overseas while you're not leaving, looking in your own community has been a problem for a long time. And but folks like the glamour of like, yeah, we have an international ministry. We got a sister church over in Zambia that we're supporting the schools, et cetera. So that's a problem.
Churches, we have work to do.
We have work to do. Yes, we do. So before we wrap up, so from a senior pastor, for pastors or ministers or aspiring pastors out there that are, trying to navigate and, that bringing and speaking, engagement, informed issues over the pulpit, what advice would you have for them that are kind of feeling the weight and the anxiety or the pressure of, getting that right? What would you kind of say to them?
Well, for aspiring pastors, you saying?
For aspiring pastors, young pastors, even, seasoned pastors.
Yeah. So start with the aspiring, and we'll say aspiring because, we'll say aspiring first. One, you got to respect the house, and you got to know who the audience is. So, if you're coming in as an invited guest, or even if you're an associate in an existing church, you can't be out prophesying the pastor. And I'm not saying prophecy in regards to fortune telling. I'm talking about truth telling, forth telling, right? So you can't overtalk the pastor. And so for those others who are kind of established, they need to get some courage and recognize and remember the God of the house, the one who called them. And so that would be my advice.
That's good. That's good. Well, there you have it. This has been another episode of Cross Perspectives. I want to thank Dr. Welch for being with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll catch you next time. Peace.